What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Essential Scares podcast, the only show that dares to ask the question, is it essential? I am your host, Corbin, and with me today, as always, are Bobby.
Buongiorno.
And Alan.
And you see, audience, I am the second best speaker of Italian on this podcast, funnily enough. Good evening.
What?
Why is that funny?
I was just making...
No. Explain the joke.
I have an explanation.
How do we know that you're the second best Italian speaker?
You said nothing in Italian.
Yeah.
That's the joke. Did anybody else said anything Italian? Corbin hasn't.
Spaghetti.
Oh, no. Oh, God, no. Now it's all over.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for you. It's embarrassing for you to find out this way. Yeah.
Yeah. See, there you go. There you go. Oh God, we have got a great show for you tonight. We are looking at one of the all-time classics of Italian cinema, the original Suspiria. But first, Bobby has a spoiler warning.
I do. This will serve as your first one and only spoiler warning for Dario Argento's Suspiria. I was going to say Dante's Inferno for some reason. Oh my God.
Or Dante's Inferno. Man, that would be awesome.
If you do not want Dario Argento's Suspiria spoiled for you, please skip the time code provided in our show notes or description for our essential spoiler-free discussion. Fun fact. Did you guys know that Dario Argento actually had a working title for Suspiria? Yeah, it was called Step Up 7, The Coven. Alan.
You know, have you ever seen Center Stage?
Great film.
that other one with Jessica Alba in it.
Oh my gosh. So Dario Argento is going to take you on a visual and oral nightmare dream sequence in this film, and you're going to love every second of it. The Technicolor viewing of this film is a masterpiece. The set itself is a character. The cinematography feels like a character. The story, the plot, the characters, they're kind of all secondary to the experience of the film. And I want to stress that heavily in the synopsis, because it is unlike anything we've watched for the show, and probably unlike anything else we will watch for the show from this point onward. It is very much so an experience, this film, in all the best ways. There is a plot going through here. Our main character, an American named Susie, who's coming to Germany to study dance ballet in a prestigious German ballet studio. Very interesting. She finally gets there after going through an interesting experience just trying to get to the ballet in a massive rainstorm, and is confronted with another girl leaving frantically. We then follow the perspective of that girl leaving frantically to see one of the most intense kill sequences in horror. It is probably the best 15-minute cold open in horror ever. And as things continue onward, Susie starts to figure out there's something wrong here. There's something going on. And she can't quite put her finger on it until it's exposed to her by another friend who knew the fleeing girl. And when they put things together, it truly becomes an absolute nightmare sequence for everybody at the ballet. And let's open it from there, boys. What a film.
This movie would not be nearly what it is if it wasn't for Goblin. This movie fucking kicks ass, and it is almost not almost entirely, but it is in large part because of the score, right? That this movie, like, it really ties the room together. Mm-hmm. It is the rug that got pissed on in The Big Lebowski. It's a metaphor that tracks. Don't question it.
I just have to take your word for that on that one.
Oh my God, you've seen what the fuck? You've used The Big Lebowski?
No, I've never seen it.
It's a good movie. You should watch it. It's about both.
Alan's never seen it either. I can tell.
What the fuck, guys? Come on.
We're not gonna say anything. He was gonna let it slide by.
Guys, what are we doing?
it's a horror
Anyway,
show.
it's a good movie. I'm done. You guys talk for a while.
Maybe if we ever had watched Essential Comedies, we could watch The Big Lebowski.
That's a preamble joke. That's from before the podcast.
Oh man,
I agree with you fully on the sound being so instrumental in the delivery.
Oh, God, man, come on!
Film. It had to be said. Come on.
You want to do an essential comedy podcast with that shit, with that
Absolutely.
level of humor we got going on?
Gotta have the bad jokes, bud. Somebody's got to do it, and I'll gladly.
Not every essential comedy is funny.
That's true.
Oh,
see, we're going down a path you didn't want.
I'm so upset. I'm so upset with this all the way.
I'm so right.
Oh boy, we managed it, Alan.
I love it.
Oh yes, the soundtrack is amazing. Of course, that's right.
It's
I think it's hard to overstate how good the soundtrack is. Right, it really is. I won't say it. I'll save it for later. But this was one of the first big movies that Goblin had done, and not the last one. But they just do an amazing job, and they do elevate the movie. I mean, I think it's important to note that the movie on its own is still very, very good.
Yes.
And even, I mean, this movie with no soundtrack would still be amazing. But it's at the same time a lesson into how important like sound design is, which for a lot of viewers I think can be difficult to catch on to sometimes. I've talked to a lot of people that a lot of times music and sound design is something that is just sort of there. You don't always notice it as part of the ambiance, and that's the intended effect. But the sound design in Suspiria in general is like so over the top, right? Like the music is like ridiculous, honestly. And also, and I noticed it a lot more this
right
time
before every kill that times,
right.
So good.
There's a lot more to like the surround sound in this one. And you guys probably, I think you watched it with headphones as well, so you probably noticed like just in general like the little like sounds around the room and like little like noises and stuff that happen. Like all of the quiet scenes have something like oddly loud going on, and it's just very intriguing, I think. But yeah, great sound design. Great sound design.
It adds to the nightmare, right? Like because like you said, this movie would have been really good regardless, right? And I think you're absolutely right. And although I said this movie wouldn't be what it is without the sound design, and I believe that. I think every time that
I don't disagree with that.
But every time a sound design in this movie, in a movie can elevate it, right? Where you the first thing you want to talk about is how good this movie sounds. It's usually the sign of a really fucking good movie, right? Like, so because usually it's like, well, the movie was kind of saved by this, like. Usually it's like everything was good, but you notice the sound design. But I don't think the sound design would like this movie is weirdly an assault on your senses.
Yes,
yeah, everything is colorful, everything is vibrant, everything is loud. And it all kind of starts in that first 15-minute cold open, right? Because like you're in this Art Deco building where it's like so colorful and so like loud and bright and like shapes and fucking it's just like what the hell is going on, like, so
it really sets the tone for like the whole movie.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's one of the more effective cold opens I think I've watched in recent time, because it gives you everything that you're going to experience in the film. You're going to be confused a little bit because it's surreal in nature. You're going to be assaulted in your ears and your eyes at an almost constant basis. The movie blends what you think is real and what actually is real. It then also has scenes of things being very calm and kind of stilted a little bit. to then have that contrasted with some of the most excessive violence that you're going to see in horror. This woman is stabbed like 5 times, once directly in the heart, and it's all shown, to then only be thrown through, or dropped through rather, a glass window,
stained glass window,
then be hung. For then her friend to also get cut up by just being a bystander. It's insane what you experience. And then it just cuts to like, okay, back to the dance ballet. Let's see what's going on here. Nothing to worry about over there. Let's continue now over here.
Well, and it's so wild because it's crazy. Like there's a giallo aspect of it. Like there's a murder mystery aspect to it, but this movie is just such a like it's just so full of fucking dream logic that like, and it strings you along, and you're the entire time you're just as confused as anybody else. Just like, why, what, why, who, why meat up in the attic? Why would you put the meat up in the attic? Why would you do that? But by the time they're asking that question, it's like, but don't you want to know about the headmistress? And they're just like, I do want to know about the headmistress. What's going on?
Well, now that you brought it up,
it's just,
I mean...
yeah. Well, you mean that lady that's half skeleton behind that curtain there? Yes, I would very much like to know about her.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the other thing to highlight here is throughout all of this, all that we've talked about so far, your visual assault, hearing assault. Then there's the cinematography to just bring everything all into like one mash that just is giving this movie is shot so brilliantly. And like it sometimes decides to just stay on things longer than you feel comfortable with. And then it just changes. Like it pushes your boundaries in ways that I don't know a movie has done for me ever.
Mm-hmm.
Minus something like Bone Tomahawk, but that's a very different kind of pushing the boundary type experience you get.
Well,
in that
and that's also like Bone Tomahawk is very American, right? And so it's kind of like it's pushing that boundary in an American way. And I think it's the Italian aspects of the movie are very strong. Even without the murder mystery being as strong, like it is still framed that way, and that kind of like invites I think that opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed like immediately, this is my first Italian horror film I've ever watched, period. So this was pretty much starting off strong on that like list of stuff.
I hope you like being disappointed going forward. I
really enjoyed this film a lot, so like I'm kind of in on this type of movie.
There's a lot of really good Italian horror and a lot of good giallos out there, but like,
not Suspiria.
It's fucking Suspiria, dude. Like,
yeah.
Spoilers, I guess. Like, I don't know.
The big thing is the blood is so different in this film compared to anything. Except,
that's an Italian thing.
You could almost make a comparison, like Evil Dead kind of maybe feels similar in terms of just like volume. I would say
say some of the earlier Living Dead movies, like Romero. Romero does blood like
Romero
that.
and Argento worked together a couple times.
That's what I was about to say. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, because Dawn of the Dead was like redone in Italy as Zombie, and Dario Argento like redid it with a Goblin soundtrack.
Zombie is a remake of Night of the Living Dead?
Dawn of the Dead.
Oh, Dawn of the Dead. Okay. For real? I didn't know that. Well, now I gotta watch that shit. That sounds fucking dope. Sounds dope as hell. Anyway,
something else I think about this film that is important is it litters you with red herrings.
Yes,
you're just constantly like on edge.
But also it doesn't.
Exactly. Well, when it doesn't. That's exactly. So we haven't really alluded to the main overarching what the hook of the film is. I think we can probably pull the lid off a little bit.
Sure.
So this whole time we're kind of going through this story. There's weird things happening. Susie gets sick. She was gonna live. off campus, but then she started finding out some stuff. So then she suddenly gets sick, and now, well, you can't leave. And here, drink this massive glass of wine every single night with dinner. Don't worry about it. Just stay here. We'll protect you. All the while, she's like assaulted by people through and through. And we come to find out at the very end that this whole time there is a coven of witches that are running this place and are, for whatever reason, attacking maybe not Americans exclusively. Was the other girl supposed to be an American? I thought she was.
Who?
The other girl who left, right, who gets killed in the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah, she was American.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then wasn't the other girl who Susie was friends with also an American?
Yeah.
Am I mistaken?
Oh, you're talking about the senior?
Yeah.
I thought she stays over the night. She doesn't die.
No, not the girl she stays with overnight. The girl who she becomes friends. Sarah. Sarah.
Oh, no. She's definitely not.
She's not. Yeah, the other girl was named like Brittany or something. Something with a B in it. I forget what her name was.
Yeah.
Barbara.
No, the girl who stays overnight with that one night. She's Barbara, maybe?
Yeah, that's yes. Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah, she's American, but like her story doesn't go like anywhere. So,
well, she's part of the coven, right? That's like the whole thing.
I think that's the.
See, that's the thing is, are they?
It's kind of implied that some of the dancers definitely are, right? But we don't. It's never really said.
A lot of them seem to be, right? Yeah,
right.
Like the one girl who gives her the shoes. Like a lot of the characters here are like, give me money, do all this stuff. Like that are like, yeah, I get a sense that are part of the coven. But go ahead. Continue your point.
It's also just very suspicious because when everything's kind of finally coming to a head with Susie figuring things out, figuring out that what she heard with the blue irises, which the movie blatantly shows you beforehand. If you pay attention, the movie spells out exactly what's going to happen. But I knew I was coming in for a mystery, but I didn't necessarily know the kind of mystery I was going to get. But like mysteriously, everybody's gone. Like again, it kind of playing into the whole dreamlike state, like what's really happening here when she discovers the coven of witches underneath the ballet. It's such if you look at this, I think if you like just look at this film and then like go, okay, it's this. It's one experience. Like if you just read the script, you get something out of it, but it doesn't do it justice explaining how it goes in terms of what the experience is while watching it unfold. They're so drastically different and interesting.
And you watch this movie, and every time you watch this movie, you'd get another of like, what the fuck is going on? Like this time I watched it and I was like, who the fuck is that lady that just follows the one teacher around everywhere? Like she doesn't have a single speaking line in the entire movie, but she follows.
She has a lot of screen time.
Sonia, is
yeah.
Like around everywhere. She's in the coven at the end. You see her. She's got her hair down. Yeah. It's like, who the fuck are you? What's going on? Like, and she's just quietly there the entire time. I think I don't get, like, there's just so much like weird shit that happens in this movie. Like they have this like does the eagle statue come down and possess the dog? Like,
well, because doesn't the eagle statue move? I thought it did.
I think it's kind of implied.
I think they're just playing with like the shadows or whatever, right? Like to like. Because there's a lot of things that like maybe happen, and that is on the list of like maybe that happened. Because like you also the dog is like he's like acting up before that, right? So like well, we don't know, right? Because like you don't really. It's not like you see the dog having like a normal day as a canine, So it's like I think that's part of what makes, even Alan, you mentioned it earlier, that like the movie has a lot of things that you think are like red herrings, but it's actually just the movie telling you exactly what's going on. And like because of that, like when you're watching it, I think some things are just like stupendously obvious, but you're like, that can't possibly be it. And so like you just like let it go.
100%.
and the dog
The
and like
movie.
I mean, those are just on that list, right? It's just like, well, what did even happen? Like, yeah.
There's a sequence,
and it's very clear. Really quick, please.
Go ahead.
Like the whole point of that is like, is this real or is she crazy? Right? Like, because like that's like the whole like, is Susie crazy or is this real? Because like mental illness, or like they spell it out for you in the whole time where they're talking with the doctors. Like, so it's like, oh,
yeah.
Well, and like to Corbin, to your point with like it spells it out for you. Susie is walking to a dance class, and those like old like babushka looking ladies shine a light in her eye, and Goblin goes, "Witch." It's like,
well, and like
you go, that can't be what this movie's about. There's no, they wouldn't tell me that. 33 minutes into the film, that's 90
before anything.
They say it so many times, even before happens. Then. Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, the which part of the soundtrack? I think is part of the very beginning of the intro, even the cold open.
It is when she sees what's her face running through the forest. It goes, witch,
it plays on
like,
and of course, like definitely when I saw the movie for the first time, which was in the theater. I went to a special showing before the remake came out, and I definitely remember when I first saw it, I didn't even realize that they were saying witch. Like, it just sounded like I was just like absorbed in like the experience. You know, they could have been saying anything. And now, of course, on the rewatches, it's like it's so obvious. And then they even at the very end of the movie, like the last line of dialogue is them saying it one more time in the soundtrack, and like it's like, okay, like just in case you didn't get it, like, here it is, and it's been here the whole time. But it's just one of those things that like I definitely didn't notice the first time, because it's like there's so much going on and there's so much noise, like visual and audio. Like there's just so much that obvious, you know, note to the audience is like it went right past me.
Well, I mean, like, and I think that's the point. Is like you're so fucking like caught up in the goddamn, like, because what this movie does do really well is it just catches you up in like the weird dream logic, right?
Yeah,
like,
you forgive any of those like logical fallacies. You are watching logical fallacies in front of you for an hour and a half straight, and you don't think, like, so many times in these films we'll like be like, well, this doesn't make any sense, and like it doesn't earn it. This film is the exact opposite of that. It earns all of the nonsense because it overloads you in such a good way.
You're so weirded out by it that for a large portion of this movie nothing happens, but it always feels like something is about to happen, which I think like a large part of this movie is you're being poisoned, but like you don't know, right? Because even that, when she discovers these points, like it goes, oh yeah, of course, that's why she's being like that's why she's struggling, right? And she was cursed. That's why she had a brain aneurysm. Like, it's all of a sudden, it's like, oh yeah, dude, duh. Oh yeah, dude, duh. Like, and it just like, but like the entire, like, so like it all. I think what makes this movie, another reason why this movie is very good, is everything pays off. Whether or not it's a real coven or she's crazy, everything pays off. You're left with a million questions, but they're not any questions about anything that happened in the movie. It's just like everything that this movie implies. Like, I think that's what's really cool.
For sure.
Yeah.
The other thing too is like the perspective shifts so often. Like this camera is all over the place, and again, it's chaotic because it is, but it's chaotic because it kind of has to be. Like, you're seeing different perspectives all the time. Like, the one that comes to mind for me specifically is like when the pianist is, you know, getting reamed by Sonia, and like there's this shot when she throws his cane, and the perspective is like this like God view up above, and it's like, you know, you're watching this and you don't know that there's a witch coven that is affecting everything within the sanctum here. To then by the end, when you like think back on that, it's like, oh,
yeah,
the headmistress was watching this. Like that's like what it feels like, those perspectives, because they happen through and through the film. These like really high, tall, like big perspectives on what's going on, and it's just beautiful. It's so good.
No, I agree entirely. It's like there's just so much of these like what the fucking fucks that happen all throughout this. It's really good. It's really good. Quick question though. Anything about this movie that we didn't like?
I mean, the acting isn't great. If there's like the only thing I could like, the sequence when early in the film when Susie is like introduced to all of the different dancers, it's pretty stilted throughout. Part of that could be the way translation works with language, and I get it. But like even without that, like I feel like that sequence would still feel a little stiff, even if I was listening to everyone in there speaking Italian, for example. Like it feels a little stilted at times. But again, that kind of feels intentional to some degree. So it's sure. Like that's about weird. The only thing I have as a complaint, though.
Any complaints at all?
That's fair. I mean, honestly, no. That is kind of the one thing that I do. I notice it, like when I watch it. What Alan said, the acting. Like, I don't think that the acting is bad, but I think that it is one of those things that is much more 1977 about the movie. Like, it's just, I think the acting style is different. It's not what we're used to now. And, like acting has styles and it changes over time, and it is very different from today. And on top of that, a lot of the actors were Italian actors that only spoke Italian, that were doing a movie in English. And there's plenty of stories and plenty of behind the scenes about those actors that they didn't know what they're saying. They're just like do the best that they could on set, and then they were redubbed later. And it's like, there is sort of a how much can you expect out of that situation. But I think a lot of it, like to Alan's point about like he doesn't think it would be that different if it was in Italian. I agree, it probably wouldn't be that different, and I think it's just like the acting style. So I don't necessarily think that it's bad, but it does stand out the most compared to like movies of today. It's just very different.
Well, again, it plays into the kind of dream logic, I think, to a certain extent. Just like everybody's just kind of like out of it and like, whoa, you know what I mean? Like loopy and on it. So yeah, I
for sure.
I have no complaints at all. Look, like people could talk about this movie for hours, right? About like some of the individual framing and shots and like and composition, and the color on this movie is just so like I love the just straight up just red like RGB lighting, just like straight up red and then straight up green. It's just there's just so much about this movie that just like it tickles
when night
me.
comes, the color becomes even more like the contrast in the color becomes so much more vibrant, and it's like when the night comes, everything else also does. Like it's imposing.
Yeah,
like you can't escape it. It's just always there, and it's even like I wouldn't say it's played for laughs, but there's like there's a moment where like the lights go out and then they come back red, and I mean it's like a half second between lights dim red, and it's like in a lot of films you'd look at that sequence go, that's really hokey and dumb and it doesn't work, like what has happened. But in this, it's like we've been primed for so long to know like oh yeah, that's just the world we're in. Red now. It is what it is.
I did lie. I do have one criticism.
Okay.
The bat sequence.
Okay.
That shit's so stupid. Like it does not work. It does not. It's like the one part of this movie where it's like, is that just like a bat on strings? What's going on there? Like
it absolutely is. And you can totally see the strings.
Like this is like this movie is like perfect. Why is this here? Like nobody thought, hey, let's edit this 3 minutes out. What the fuck? Hello, hi. Like so.
Well, the movie is perfectly length, so they just couldn't take those 3 minutes.
I think that's the problem. Is like it would probably if they're like fuck this didn't work, but it'll fuck up the pacing. People will be fine with it, and the reality is, I'm like,
right. Yeah, you are fine with it. Yeah.
Like, I'm not gonna like, yeah. So
I have a question for you guys.
yes.
So something that I kept kind of coming back to while I was watching this film is it feels modern, or at least it doesn't feel so 1977 to me. I think part of that could more so be like, I think modern horror maybe emulating some of the feelings here, as opposed to like it was. I mean, I would say it definitely was ahead of its time. 1977 is the same year of The Hills Have Eyes. It's like, and I'm not to disparage that film. That's an incredible film too. But just think of how drastically different of an experience you have as a film goer if you see The Hills Have Eyes versus this film. Very different type of experience. But
I don't think it is. I think
really?
I think that this movie is very. I think one of the problems that we have is a lot of horror movies are not based around their true like gems, but based around their schlock. When you think of when you think of like 1970s horror, you think of like, like a Friday the 13th, even though it's mostly like 80s and shit like that, right? You think of like, I think it's all 80s actually, right? And like, so I think the famous,
Yes, it is.
I don't know, but you think of
1980
like,
was the first one.
you think of like,
okay, I wasn't sure it was 80 or
like,
79.
The 70s is like a really groundbreaking time, but you don't think of like The Exorcist as like a horror movie, even though it is, right? But like when we think of horror, we think of like genre films. We don't think of films that broke into mainstream very often, right? And so we usually think of like stuff that's a little more schlocky, a little bit more B, right? And Suspiria is decidedly not that, right? It's smart, it's interesting, it's like just bonkers to the wall. And so you compare that to other movies that are like, wow. And we're currently in a renaissance of horror where like you're either getting like absolute garbage bullshit, but everyone's trying to elevate it to make it like the good stuff. We want to make all of our horror movies the good horror, right? Which has had mixed results. So people, I think, are very much, to your point, emulating that, but I think it's very much of its time, right? It's hyper violent in a way that movies hadn't been in the past, in the same way that like The Hills Have Eyes or Last House on the Left was, right? Or Halloween was. Like there's like
Texas Chainsaw
was. Yeah. Like it's very much this like, and it's also very European in the fact that it is like much more gory than anything in America was frankly allowed to be at the time. So I think it is very much of the time. I just don't think we remember this time as well or as fondly as maybe we should have.
Do you think it's probably just overshadowed because the 80s is slasher gore fest, and when people like I guess through like an American lens, when you think of like horror, I feel like let me rephrase. Actually, I think the general more lexicon, when someone thinks of horror films, they think of Jason, they think of Freddy, they think of Michael Myers. Like you have those touchstones. It's kind of like these ones that really kind of set the stage for what you could do that came before. Kind of feel like they get lost in the wayside to like the general audience, I would say. I mean, obviously I think horror enthusiasts are gonna be like, Suspiria, yeah, it's great. Hills Have Eyes, great. Last House on the Left, these are all great films. I think we've all seen all of them, because I know I actually have seen all of those myself. So like it I don't know, it's just, I kept, when I kept watching this, I just kept feeling like it just didn't feel, I don't know how to describe it per se. Like I said, it didn't feel aged, I guess. And it's not to say that other films from this era do per se, but it had a different sheen to it that I haven't previously experienced. And that could just be the European, Italian kind of.
I was going to say, all the
movies
you described, like, I don't think the original Hills Have Eyes feels aged. Like I think it still works, and in a way that is deeply unsettling in its own way. Like
very much so.
Like I think maybe the remake has aged a little bit because it entirely misses the point. But
don't talk mean about Corbin's favorite era, era of horror. You know, those aughts horrors.
Well, no, but I think very much to your point, right? There is a certain level in the early. Well, I don't hate on all early aughts horror. No. I think there's a place for it, but like I think that there is a certain like we remember Saw, right, from of early aughts horror because it was truly innovative, right? I think the problem with 1970s horror is like it was innovative, but like there was just so much of it that was innovative. It was like it was when it's like you remember every emo screamo band of that era of like when emo screamo first like figured it out, right? We remember Chiodos, we remember Silverstein, we remember Alisana, we remember Under Oath, we remember all of them because all of them were like it was new, fresh, interesting, and different, right? And then we kind of remember that second phase, right? We kind of remember the Asking Alexandrias, the Data remembers, right? When post-hardcore and metalcore were kind of these sleeping with sirens, if you will, right? We're kind of becoming a thing. But then you get to a point where it starts to get samey and you need a shot in the arm. And every so often you'll get a scream, right? But you need something like a Saw that goes like, holy fuck, we can just make this fucked up, right? And so I think that's part of the I think that's what we're doing right now is we're harkening back to an era where everything could be innovated again. And it's like, fucking take the rules off. Anything could be anything. And I think that's what we're kind of maybe seeing now. Maybe. I don't want to ever put that on there, right? But horror being in this weird elevated place that it is in today. So I think that might be what you're jumping into.
That could be it. Is it kind of it feels like elevated horror before elevated horror was like a thing. I guess is probably the easiest like way to synthesize my thoughts into something more concrete. But it's just it's such an experience.
It's so good. But how good is it on a scale?
That's a great question.
0 to 5 with half points allowed. Which is how we rate these bad boys on this movie.
Who's taking this first? Oh, I'm going to go first? Okay. So oftentimes we write down our scores. And I wrote my score down. And of course it's a 5. This movie was a 5 15 minutes into the fucking film, everybody. Like, it had already done something so drastically. My experience with this film was just one of pure bliss. I gave my one critique of the acting, but it's so obnoxiously minimal that it just means nothing when I'm thinking through this film. Like, I'm not ever going to think of the stilted acting after we've just made this discussion. But you know what I am going to think about? I'm going to think about just how viscous that blood was in the very first sequence. I'm going to think about how when Susie is walking towards the exit of the airport, and I get assaulted with music, and then it goes back to Susie, and the music's gone, and she looks confused as much as I am. Those are the things I'm going to think about. I'm going to think about how insane it was that they tell me everything. They told me everything I need to know, but I couldn't put it together on the first watch. These are the things I'm going to think about. It's been in my brain for 2 weeks since I watched this, and it's just I can't. It's such an evocative film. It's an absolute masterpiece. 5 out of 5.
I will go next in classic ABC format, and I will say that it's Suspiria. You've watched this movie if you're listening to the spoiler cast, right? You know, you get it. You just wanting us to gush with you this entire time. Of course, it's a 5 out of 5. That's all I really have to say. I told you my favorite bit off the top. Goblin kicks ass. They also did another one of my favorite giallos, Deep Red. I didn't realize they did that, but I also fucking love the music in that, so that tells me a lot. This movie just fucking owns. It's amazing. It's weird. It's the kind of weird that like I love a lot. I love a weird flick, and that's it. It's Argento. It's Suspiria. 5 out of 5. Period. Like Corbin.
Yeah. So, there's a lot that's been said about Suspiria so far. I'm not going to give you the runaround. So this is a 5 out of 5 for me. I thought about doing it, but I couldn't come up with a good enough way to do the runaround. So
that's exactly. It's like, what the fuck? Why can't I think of anything bad about this movie?
For all the reasons mentioned and more, I mean, it deserves it. There's probably other things that are better suited for the next segment, but I think that it just is such immediately the 5 because there's really nothing wrong with it, right? It's fast paced. Everything is like perfectly timed out. It's a movie that was just like it feels like the kind of movie that is once in a filmography, right? And I've seen other Argento movies, and his other movies are good. He is a shining beacon of Italian horror, and he just is. But there's still, even among like the greats, there's still the movies that are like, this was just the perfect time. It's the perfect time, the perfect script, everything came together, right? And this is it. There's just no problems with it, really. 5 out of 5.
Well, that's not all we do on this horror movie podcast. We also decide whether or not Dario Argento's Suspiria is essential to horror movies as a whole. Now, again, dear listener, this is a spoiler-free segment, but I will let you know that every single member of this podcast gave this a resounding 5 out of 5 spooky, scary, skelly men. Now, going in oops uno reverse order, Corbin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is Suspiria essential?
Yeah. So, is Suspiria essential? I would counter that with a question back to you, back to Alan, back to anybody listening or watching. I would counter that with a question like, do you think that Halloween is essential? Or Texas Chainsaw Massacre? The Exorcist, maybe?
Essential.
Exactly. This is one of the best horror movies of the 70s, and I didn't jump in earlier, but I mean, I think that the 70s are a treasure trove of great horror movies, and this is one of them. It is a touchstone in horror history and in Italian horror. It is the most horrific entry out of somebody whose filmography is not full of traditional horror. It's kind of like a Jaws in that way. And it is also eminently watchable. Alan, you mentioned it earlier. You felt like this movie feels modern. I don't agree with that, but I do think that this movie is very watchable. And I think that, you usually have some sort of bias towards like movies of the era, stuff that you're watching a lot more. And there definitely is something about horror now that is a little bit more, old school, at times. Like look at like Ty West stuff, which Alan, you really like, X and Pearl and all those.
I do really like.
Those are very 70s. Those are very 70s styled. And this is as well, and it just 50 years later almost, it doesn't feel like it's quite that old. It's just a perfect movie. It's absolutely essential.
Big time. I guess that would be me.
Bobby, that's you.
Yeah, it's reverse, so it's to you, Bob.
I guess what I'll have to say is the same thing I said for writing it. It's Suspiria. Like, what the fuck do you want me to say, right? It's iconic and excellent, right? It is a masterpiece of terror. It is a movie that if you haven't watched, watch it. And I feel like if I say anything more about it, I'll give too much away. So go ahead, watch it, know that you're in good hands. Yes, absolutely essential.
Okay. This was one of, again, pretty similarly, I said within about 15 minutes I knew this was a 5. I also was pretty aware at about that same time, like, okay, yep, this is all making sense. Like watching this film, especially, I kind of got a lot out of it by just not having seen much of any European horror almost at all. I mean, I've seen like, what's the troll one?
Troll Hunter.
Troll Hunter, which is kind of horror. It's horror-y. Yeah, it took me a second. And like there are other aspects of like it's American made horror but takes place in Europe that I like Midsummer and I can't remember the other one that I watched for 33 Days of Halloween a year or so ago. But I like that setting. I like European setting. It feels different. It feels, out there. This film is just embodies.
Oh, you're
gonna
love Hostel, dude.
Of course, it's essential. Absolutely. I've never seen Hostel, but I do like Saw, and I always remember those movies being like around at the same time.
They were.
Yeah, of course this movie is essential. It was no questions asked from a very early point that I knew.
Well, it seems like we've got a perfect movie in all regards.
Yep.
Probably one of the most, dare I say it, worthy entries to make it into our Hall of Fame. But, dear listener, that's not all we do on this podcast. We also end the podcast by telling you guys what our handles are, what we've been up to lately.
You can find me at a seal punter just about anywhere.
You guys thought I didn't remember what we were going to do at the end. I always remember, baby.
Sometimes you know what, Bobby? I love you for that. That's perfect. What have I been doing lately? Well, there's a tournament for Warhammer in 5 days that I'm participating in here down in Indianapolis. I'm very excited. It's going to be my first experience in like true competitive, proper Warhammer. So that's going to be interesting. I'm going to be fielding the knights. I have a lot to paint still. And I have about 2.5 days to realistically do it. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time painting up my boys. And that's about it for me. I don't got much else going on. A seal punter just about anywhere.
Wow. Well, you can find me at twitch.tv/threadweenie, where I have not streamed in over 2 months. I just haven't. I want to, but I also get to that point where it's like, Oh, that's very funny. Anyway, sorry, there's been a side chat happening here. What have I been up to? Nothing much. There is a game called Escapist Academy. That I play with my wife. It's basically you play escape rooms on Xbox. It's on Game Pass. We beat it in a single day, so it's a very short game, but it's fun. It's a good time. Other than that, my usual bullshit. I'm almost done with rewatching It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia again.
I'm gonna put that on while I paint my guys tonight.
Yeah, but yeah. Twitch.tv/threadweenie. All my relevant socials are there. Follow me then so you can see it when it happens. Cool.
Nice. You can find me anywhere at Volters_Bourbon. I'm on X, Threads, and Instagram. And you can also follow me at Corbangering on the same. On the former, I talk about like Warhammer and hobby stuff, and on the latter, I talk about video games, basically. What have I been up to lately? I finally finished phase 1 of my garage retrofit, I guess, which was basically just like totally cleaning everything out and rearranging my shelving and doing all sorts of stuff like that.
It is a good look.
It is. Thank you. It's definitely been nice to have it just a little bit more livable, more walkable. So because of that, honestly, the main thing that I've been doing is getting back into 3D printing. I don't know how much of it I talked about on episodes like months and years ago, but I'm really into that on the side as kind of a Warhammer adjacent hobby. So that's really what I've been doing. But yeah, follow me at Bolters_Bourbon, at Corbangering. And while you're at it, why don't you give the podcast a follow at Essential Scares? We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, and one day Threads. We
and maybe one day Twitter again.
Right? Yeah, maybe one day Twitter again for sure. In the links to all of our our social bio is a link to our Discord and to our other socials. But on our Discord, we hang out all the time and talk about movies, music, games, and more. If you ever have suggestions for the show or feedback, we would love to hear it. Or if you ever just want to talk to us about any topic that you would like to talk to us about, we are totally open to it. We're going back and seeing movies again, which is great, and we would love to talk to you guys about stuff that is not podcastable right now. With that in mind, with that in mind, we are continuing our journey through foreign horror with next episode, Ringu, we're watching, which is going to be our first episode in over the course of like a year, I think, where we're going to watch all of Ringu, hopefully, and maybe until we get tired of Ringu. Unlike previous franchises that we've done, we will not be watching them all back to back to back. We're going to watch Ringu, and then we'll watch a couple other movies, and we'll come back for the second one. And then, if all goes well, you can come back to us like 30 episodes from now, and we'll be watching Ringu versus The Grudge. But until
my
then,
God, I forgot that Ringu versus
That's a
The Grudge
real
thing.
entry?
Yes, it is.
That's a real thing?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
What? It's the Freddy versus Jason of Japan.
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. But until then, thank you so much to everybody for listening and for watching. We love you all. If you liked the show, please give us a rating, a review, a subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family. And I hope you enjoyed your time that you spent with us. Thank you to Alan and Bobby for being on the show with me this week. I have been your host, Corbin, and this has been Essential Scares.
Play that witch, baby.